Welcome to the next Monday Mechanicals. Now, last time we fitted a new chain, and so it seemed fairly logical to carry on with that, to show you how to replace a gear cable and set up your gears. Because despite it being pretty simple, it seems to be a thing that most people have real problems with, particularly in this office here. Now, you may be thinking there's nothing wrong with my gear cable, why would I want to change it? But the reason why most people's gears don't work is not just due to bad adjustment, it's also due to the state of the gear cable. If your gear cable's got lots of grit in it and dirt, your gears are never going to work no matter how well you try and set them up. Also, if you've got one bike you don't tend to notice it, but gradually it gets stiffer and stiffer, the cable, and you have to put more and more force through the gear shifter. And when you do that, particularly on some cheaper shifters, the internals are made out of plastic, the ratchets and that's the main reason why shifters break. Right, first things first, before you rip your old cable off, if you haven't yourself fitted it and you know it's perfect length and routing the cable, you should think about, is it the right length, the cable, because that can make a difference. Too short and it will cause problems, and too long it's just excessive, looks ugly and won't help you shifting. This bike looks like it's got pretty good cable routing, so we'll just check the length of it. So at this end it's fine, it's all neat there, not too long, not too short. And we'll just check by turning the handlebars as far as they go. Obviously, because this bike's got triple clamps, they don't go that far, so it's not pulling on anywhere there, it's not really too long. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the cable length there, so we'll copy that, we'll pull that off and we'll copy it when we do the new bit. First of all, just quickest way, just cut that cable, old one, pull that out. Now, because this bike's got zip ties, I'll try and reuse these, so not undo them, so I'll try and pull the cable outer out, just saves you constantly having to use zip ties. So we've got our cable outer off. I'll just pull the ferrules off. These are the black end bits, that's what they're called. I'll just pull them off because they add a bit of length, so just to get an accurate cut. Right, so we've got the old bit of cable outer, and before we measure it up to here, it doesn't look like the last person who used this cut it very straight, so I'm just going to make sure that end's nice and straight cut. Then I'll just put this alongside. So now we've got it the right length, we'll just cut cable, make sure it's straight. Now, this is where my little spiky tool comes in. What we want to do is, at the moment, you can see the end of the cable isn't particularly round. The plastic liner and everything is a bit messed up, and we want that to be nice and round and clean for the cable so it doesn't cause extra friction. So, easiest way to cure that, to get it round, just put it in your teeth, squidge it a little bit, we got it round, that'll open up, put my pointy bit in there, wiggle it round. You can use a, like I said, a sharpened spoke or something like that. Now we've got a nice round cable with a nice clear opening, so the inner cable will go through that nice and smooth. Just check the other end. So now we've got our outer cable ready, just got to put the ferrules on the ends. Now, standard good quality one like this, Shimano one, has a little rubber seal in it, which does help keep the dirt out, but it actually adds a bit of friction as well. And me being pretty anal about these things, I like to use actually a slightly cheaper unsealed one on the shifter end, because I think dirt doesn't tend to get in there. So I do that, and it just means your shifting's as light and as smooth as possible. So now we've got the outer cable ready, we'll take the inner cable out. On Shimano shifters, they pretty much all have a little screw like this, and if it's shifted down to the lowest gear, the cable literally just comes straight out like that. If it's not in the lowest gear, so if we shift it like that, it won't come out. But if you shift down, then it'll line up and it'll come out neatly. SRAM, slightly different, it has a little top cap up here you have to take off to get the cable out. The only other bit of old cable we've got left to remove is at the rear mech itself. 5mm Allen key, pretty much on all rear derailleurs. Just unscrew that, pull that out. So now we've got rid of the old cable, ready to fit the new one. So we'll just feed this through here, making sure, like I said earlier, you get the best possible routing. You'll notice this bike has a continuous gear outer. Previously, on sort of, it was always, you had sections of outer and then some exposed inner cable. It was always thought good to keep the outer cable as short as possible because it reduced shifting performance, but nowadays gear outers got so good that you don't really have to worry about that. And to keep the dirt out, most bikes now are coming with continuous gear outer, and it's much better. And even if your bike doesn't have it like that, sometimes you're better off zip tying continuous outer rather than having gaps where mud can get in and dirt. So now I've got the outer cable in place. What I'd actually do now, if you're going to adjust the gears, this is where I'd start now before you even put the inner cable in, because there's a couple of things you can do without the inner cable there. It just makes it clearer, easier to see what you're doing, and it's just good to have the inner cable out of the way. So we'll grab a flathead screwdriver, and might need the Allen key. Right, the first thing you got to check whenever adjusting your gears, because it'll be a waste of time if you don't check this, is you've got to check that your rear dropout, rear mech hanger is straight, because if you have a crash or something, this is the bit that I'm sure a load of you know bends. This bit here should be parallel to the wheel, so if it's bent in or bent outwards, normally bent in, it will just throw your gears out completely. It doesn't matter what you do to adjust your gears, they'll never work. So before you even start, make sure that's straight, which this one is. If it's not, you can either bend it back in some cases, or you need to buy a new replaceable mech hanger. We'll now start without the cable in and do the adjustments. These are your low and your high adjustment screws. Now people tend to get confused which is which, but it's pretty, if you think of it, L stands for low speed, which most people know is this gear up here, and H stands for high speed, which is this gear down here. Now a lot of people, when their gears aren't working, they start twiddling with these screws all the time, but in actual fact these screws only adjust two gears. They adjust that gear and that gear. They don't make any difference to any of the gears in the middle. So we want to make sure they're basically limit screws, limit how far the mech will move. And to adjust them, what I'll do, I'll move the high one in too much to show you. So now, so we haven't got the cable in, just makes things clearer. So now you see there's no cable in, but it won't go down to this lower one. So what we want to do, unscrew the limit screw, and now it's dropped down. So now when we push it up like that with our finger, it should drop down neatly. It should be pretty quiet now, which this one is, even though the chain's not really oiled, and that shows it's well aligned. Once this screw is adjusted, you should never need to touch it, really. It should stay in place, and unless you change your cassette or something like that, or you do bend the mech hanger and you've got to do an emergency repair, you shouldn't need to touch that screw at all. And the same with this one, once you've adjusted this one, the low one. So to check the low one, you can check that as well without a cable in. You just use your thumb, push it up, use that to push the rear mech, and this one is correctly adjusted. It's shifted up there fine, and it hasn't over shifted and gone into the spokes. Again, if you look from behind, it should be in line with that sprocket. If you do it too far wound out, it'll shift over into the spokes and it'll make a little noise beforehand as well. And if it's screwed too far in, it won't shift onto the sprocket. So now we've adjusted the rear mech, the basic adjustments on that, we'll fit the inner cable. First of all, what I'll do is I'll wind in the barrel adjuster so that I've got some adjustment left. I'll wind it right the way in, then maybe a turn outwards just in case I do the cable too tight. Then simply feed the gear cable into the shifter, then put it into the outer. Oh, got to remember my magic, cable magic as it's called. So you can put this in at this stage, just squeeze a bit into the end of the cable, you only need a tiny bit. Then when you push the cable in, it'll push that loop all the way through. So once that's through, you can pull it through, make sure it's sat in the shifter properly, which it is. Once we know that is, we can put the little plastic shifter cable cover back in that we haven't lost. Right, so now we've got the cable through, we need to clamp it in the rear mech. Now, the mistake a lot of people make is they clamp the cable on the wrong side of the bolt. It may not sound like much, but it throws out the whole leverage, and there's a little groove. There'll always be a little groove of some kind, so look for that. Place the cable in there and do it up. So now we've got the cable in, we'll trim off the excess off the end just to neaten it up, otherwise it's going to catch in the spokes while we do it. So we don't want it too long because otherwise it's going to catch, not too short because it'll make things difficult. So about that length's pretty good. Now to keep things neat, put a little end cap on the cable. You can crimp these with cable cutters or pliers or anything. I find cable cutters a bit easy to chomp through the cable sometimes, so I just use these little snips of mine to do that. So before we start adjusting the gears properly, we fitted the cable. We just want to try and stretch the cable as much as possible. They're supposedly pre-stretched, but you can always stretch them a bit more and get all these ferrules and that to seat properly. If you don't do it, then you'll find you'll go out on your first ride and within 5 seconds your gears will go out, and you'll have to readjust them. So you might as well do it now. And one of the easiest ways of doing it, if you haven't got any cable here to pull on, is to just shift it up to the top and push hard on the shifter, and you should be able to stretch the cable a little bit. If you have to, unwind the adjuster a bit to put a bit more tension on the cable. And once you've done that, you know everything's sat in properly, and you might still have to readjust it after a ride, but it's better to try and do that beforehand. So now we've got the cable fitted, we'll do the adjustment. So we've got this limit screw right, so we know that's okay. So we'll try shifting up one gear. So I've shifted once. Now I can hear it trying to shift, but it's a fraction too slack. So we'll now use the adjuster and we'll wind that out a little bit. So now we've taken some of the slack up with the shifter, the adjuster on the shifter. Now when I push the shifter, it shifts up. A tiny bit slow, so we'll give it another tiny tweak on the shifter. And it's shifted up now. So we've got shifting up seems okay, so we'll just check on the way back down. Oh, I shifted twice then. That's XTR shifters for you. Should drop nice and cleanly, nice and quickly. So there we go. That actually seems pretty good. So basically, if it's not shifting up, you need to wind the adjuster. Let's just stop the wheel so it's not quite so noisy. You need to wind the shifter outwards, which is, if you're looking at the end, would be anti-clockwise. And if it's over shifting, you need to wind it inwards, which would be clockwise. So that gives you the adjustment of all your indexing up and down. There's one final piece of adjustment that I haven't talked about yet that can make a difference, quite a big difference to your shifting performance. Most people don't really seem to know about it, but that's I think the technical Shimano term for it is a B tension screw, but a lot of mechanics call it the angle of dangle screw, and it's this one here. Now on a Saint one rear mech, I can actually see this is called a close ratio cassette, so it's not quite as high as a normal one, and these Saint mechs have a special thing which I see someone has actually left in on this bike, and it should be removed, which makes it work better with a close ratio cassette. So basically I'm going to remove this little piece here, which is designed if you've got a bigger cassette. The whole point of this angle of dangle screw, or B tension screw, is that it adjusts how far away the jockey wheel is from the cassette, and if the jockey wheel is too far away, then you don't get as good shifting. If it's too close, then again it'll affect your shifting, so getting it spot on is quite critical. So that's our little piece removed, and we'll now screw the rear mech back on. So now just put the rear mech back on, and what should now be apparent is that the jockey wheel is a bit closer to the cassette. So with this screw, if we wind it in, you'll see it brings the jockey wheel further away from the cassette, but we want to get it as close as we can without it causing any problems. Now on this bike I can see that it might actually hit the pivot if we do it too low. So that is as low as I can get it without the pivot obstructing the rear mech. but that's pretty much spot on anyway. We'll just check shifting up to the top. It looks quite a way away, but that's because we've got a close ratio cassette. It's better than it was before when it had that other piece in. But basically, the closer you get this to here, within reason, if it's too close it will cause problems, but the closer you get that, the better shifting you'll have. So now, just check it. There we go. Shifting all done. So there you go, job's good. New cable, adjusted gears. You'll enjoy your next ride a lot more because your gears will work. Simple as that. Till next time, keep it taut.